Hardly a secret that clear communication is really important to healthy relationships. But how do you communicate clearly when the other person insists on arguing? You guys, there is a superpower. It's really easy, and you can tap into it, and it is going to change the way you show up and communicate in your relationships, especially when you're dealing with somebody who's feeling incredibly argumentative. The secret superpower comes down to this. It is understanding and believing one simple fact about humans. Our behavior always makes perfect sense. It's always reasonable. And I know that what we're talking about right now is somebody who's acting in a way that seems incredibly unreasonable. But yes, sometimes our actions on the surface seem crazy. They seem overly aggressive. They seem mean. We use this word crazy a lot to describe our partners. Why is she acting so crazy? Because her behavior seems unreasonable. I'm telling you right now, her behavior is not unreasonable, and holding on to that, insisting that that is true, and fighting to find out what's really going on, that is the secret to communication. So let me give you some examples. Right? Let's say you're trying to have a conversation with your partner about finances, and you're trying to lay out a budget and talk about your spending. And she's just really defensive. She feels like you're attacking her and judging her spending, and that you just don't care about the things that are important to her, and you're just being such a prick, and why it doesn't even matter, right? And she's just getting louder and louder and more upset. And you're like, why is she acting so crazy? I'm not judging her for her spending. I'm just trying to have a clear conversation about our budget. We have this amount of money coming in. We need to, take care of the bills. It seems reasonable to me. Why is she acting crazy? Let's assume that her behavior makes perfect sense. She's not acting crazy. Okay, so how do we explain it? Anger is a secondary emotion. It is always layered on top of something deeper. Usually what's underneath that is a fear. It's almost always fear. I was going to say sometimes it's a desire for something that you want, but even that's a fear, because the anger is coming from the fear that you're not going to get something that's really important to you, or it's a fear that you're going to lose something that's important to you, or it's a fear that something is out of your control and you're in danger. So anger is secondary almost always to fear. And I want you to think about it when someone's being defensive. It's right in that word. It's a defense mechanism. They feel threatened and they're trying to protect themselves. It doesn't matter if you don't think you're being threatening. They feel threatened. They're being defensive. You know two things about them already. You know that they're afraid of something, and you know that they feel threatened. And you also know that all human behavior is rational. So that means that there is a reason. If we could look into her brain and understand what's going on, there's a reason she feels threatened. There's a reason she feels afraid. So your job isn't to get defensive and fight back with her. Your job is to be the detective and figure out, what is she really saying? And she says, why are you attacking me? You're being such a dick. You don't even care, right? I don't even spend that much money. I don't see how, why is this your problem? What is she really saying? She's not really talking about the money. She's talking about the way you see her, the way she thinks you see her. She's feeling threatened and judged. She feels like her partner, the person that's supposed to be on her team, on her side, is attacking her. Maybe she feels really misunderstood. Maybe she feels alone. Maybe she feels afraid that you're going to find out she did something and not love her anymore, and she's going to lose you. That's surface anger. That is not the whole story. What she's lashing out at you about, it's not what's really going on. Let's do another example. Let's talk about intimacy. It's really common for couples to argue about intimacy. And I want to use this example. Like, let's say you're trying to be reasonable. You're trying to talk about your sex life, and inherently in that conversation, I'm trying to increase my connection to you. That's what this is all about. But your partner gets defensive. She's like, well, you always just expect me to initiate it. And you always want it when you want it. And you're never, you're not conscious of how hard my day was or what I might need to get in the mood. And she just gets angry and she starts to yell at you, and you never pay attention and you don't care about her, and on and on and on. How do you communicate calmly and clearly when she's argumentative? This is where you tap into that superpower. You know her behavior is perfectly rational. You know that underneath anger is fear, and you know she feels threatened. So what is she afraid of? In this case, she's afraid of not being loved, of not being seen, of not being heard and appreciated and cared for the way she is. When she says, you never initiate sex the way I want it, what she's really saying is, I'm afraid you don't care about me enough. I'm afraid you don't love me enough. If you did, I think you would do it this way. Anger isn't because she hates you and doesn't want to have sex with you. It's because she's afraid that there's something wrong with her or something wrong between the two of you where you don't care about her or love her as much as she needs to be loved. You guys, we are human animals. We are wired for connection. We are wired for attachment and love. And when somebody's being argumentative or being defensive, they're feeling threatened and they're afraid that either they can't give you the connection that you need in the way you want and you're going to leave this relationship, or they're afraid that you're not going to give it to them. It is all about the fear of being rejected, of being abandoned, and of not being enough, not being worthy of somebody's love. So this is a light I want you to shine on an argument. When you see your partner starting to get angry and starting to get defensive, I want you to remind yourself, this is natural, right? This is a defense mechanism to protect them from a perceived threat. Why are they threatened? What are they afraid of right now? I want you to become the detective. Instead of responding to their anger, respond to the primary emotion, to the fear that's under it. This will help you see your partner through a lens of compassion instead of frustration. And if you assume that the way they feel makes sense, right, that it's not crazy, that it makes sense based on their fears, their beliefs, their past experience, you don't have to start convincing them now that it's different. You don't have to argue with them. You can just validate and be curious for them. Like, wow, I see you're getting really upset about this. Tell me about what's going on. What are you afraid of? Sometimes you can be that direct. What are you afraid of right now? Sometimes you can be that direct and straight up ask them, what are you afraid of? If you do that with kindness, compassion, a calm tone, and genuine curiosity, sometimes people will just open up. You've given them an opportunity to talk about what's really happening, which they may not have even been aware of. Other times you might not ask directly, but instead you might speak to that underlying fear. They're getting angry at you about the intimacy and blaming you and getting upset. Instead of asking about their fear, in that case, you might just say, you know, I really care about you. I love you. And I want to find a way to connect more deeply. You are offering comfort. You know that their underlying fear is about being rejected, about being abandoned, about being not worthy of love, about not getting the love that they need. You know that's the underlying fear. So you speak to it. As they're getting angry, you look at them through that lens of compassion and you say, oh, they're afraid. And you speak to that. You say, hey, I'm here. I care about you. I'm having this conversation because I love you and I want to be connected to you. How are we going to make that happen? You hear how different that is than you getting defensive and snapping back and being like, well, yeah, you know, you're not great at it either. And you never do things exactly the way I want. And our love life would be so much better if you would just X, Y, and Z. You hear how that just builds and now you're fighting. If you want to communicate clearly with your partner, you have to look past the secondary emotion. You have to look past the anger and frustration, and you have to speak to the underlying fear. If you can learn to do that, if you can learn to look at your partner when they're frustrated, when they're defensive, and say, wow, there is a person who feels threatened and afraid. This is a person I love. They are threatened and afraid right now, and they feel like they have to protect themselves. I am on their team. I am on your team. I am here with you. I care about you. I want to make this work together. I'm telling you, this is a relationship superpower. If you can start to look at anger through this lens, it will change every argument you have. It's really, really hard to have a fight with somebody who is genuinely compassionate, curious, and reaching out for you. If you hold that space, if you hold that belief, this person is being rational. This anger makes sense. It is a protection to protect them from something that they are afraid of. You start to see them in a different way. They're not being unreasonable. They're not acting crazy. They're afraid. This person that you love, that you care about, that's your partner, is afraid. How can you be there for them? How can you support them? How can you shift this conversation in a way that's going to let them feel that connection to you, feel how much you care? That is how you diffuse an argument, and that is how you communicate clearly, even when the other person insists on being defensive and argumentative. I will warn you that sometimes your own defense mechanisms are going to jump in here and get in the way. And you're going to find yourself getting defensive and angry automatically in response. So there's a lot of work that we can do to start to diffuse your defense mechanisms, the ones that make you jump in and feel attacked when these arguments start. If you would like help with that, or if you'd just like to learn more about these skills to build healthy relationships, let's talk about coaching. Book a free strategy session with me. There's a link in the video description below. Be happy to sit down, talk with you, get a sense of what you're going through in your relationship, what your goals are, and see if I'm a good fit to help you work through this.